You are in the presence of greatness. No, not me, but I'm flattered, if that's what was your first thought. Rather, I speak of my excellent grandson, who has come to Washington and to the floor of the House of Representatives to see his grandpa at work. Tonight, Luisito, who is 12, will be my escort, along with his grandma, at the annual White House picnic for members of Congress and their families. It would take away more than the allotted 5 minutes to enumerate all of the reasons for this grandfather's pride, so let me just say I'm looking forward to showing him off at tonight's gathering. But more than tonight's picnic, what I'm really looking forward to is Father's Day. This Sunday in Chicago, along with Luisito, my grandson, I'll be with his dad and my daughters, who always make the old man feel loved. And this Father's Day, I will be especially thankful for being allowed to have my family around me, because on Monday, I'll be visiting with hundreds of children who cannot be with their dads. On Monday, I'll be joining 7 of my colleagues to San Antonio to visit the 2 largest family detention facilities in the country, Carnes and Dilley, where moms and their children are being kept behind bars awaiting resolution of their immigration cases seeking asylum. Remember a year ago when tens of thousands of children and young people were fleeing violence in 3 countries in Central America? The Republicans thought that these children would bring this country to its knees, and anti-immigration groups organized mobs to protest and keep children out of detention facilities in their communities. You remember that? Well, many mothers with small children were also fleeing to the U.S. last year, and they are still fleeing, being held in detention facilities which are operated by private prison companies in Texas and Pennsylvania. They are detained for the completely lawful act of seeking asylum. My colleagues and I are going to see firsthand what's going on. The minority whip, Mr. Hoyer, and 2 of my closest allies on the family detention issue, Mrs. Lofgren and Mrs. Roybal-Allard, both of California, are going, and will be hosted by our colleague from Texas, Mr. Castro, as we visit the 2 facilities. I am sure that immigration customs enforcement personnel and even private companies who are contracted to run the facilities and profit from the incarceration of other people are trying their best to make the conditions of detention for these moms and kids as humane as they can. But you see, that misses the point. We shouldn't be holding vulnerable women and children in detention. We have mothers and small children living in jail-like facilities with uncertain futures, limited access to legal counsel, and this has been going on for some time, for almost a year for some of them. Even with schools and laundry and TVs, they are still being held behind fences. Moms still have to explain to the youngest children that, no, in fact, they do not know when they can leave or whether they will be deported back to the violent countries they fled after months in detention. Children who face trauma, gangs, murder, and sexual assault in their neighborhoods were forced to leave alone and in groups or with a parent. They faced all sorts of dangers. Smugglers and predators on the journey to northern Mexico, where we know assault and robbery and rape are commonplace. Then they crossed the U.S. border, often with the guidance of additional smugglers and criminals, and following the process in the U.S. law, presented themselves to authorities to request asylum. Now, because we have not put money into our immigration court system, and by the way, because we have not created ways for people to come here with visas instead of smugglers, we are all paying a higher price to house and feed moms and kids when much cheaper monitoring and supervision options are available. Why? The government feels that imprisoning these children and moms, even in relatively humane conditions, will be a deterrent to others. But 136 House Democrats, including all 8 members traveling to Texas on Monday, have asked Secretary of Homeland Security to end the practice of holding moms and children in detention when there are other ways to get the job done. The children are paying the highest cost. It doesn't take a developmental expert to know that weeks and months in detention, in prison-like conditions, having already lived through weeks and months and years of desperation, are not conducive to good child development. But with my Republican friends, it's usually not the human cost that matters. So let me break it down another way. At $343 per person per day, we are spending $125,000 per detainee per year, $125,000. But the alternatives to detention we could be using cost about $5.50 a day, or about $2,000 a year. That is cost savings logic that even in Washington we can understand. Mr. Speaker, regardless of how you feel about the funding and regardless of how you feel about immigration, foreign policy issues, Central America, or any other issues, you cannot lose sight of the fact that we're talking about children. As a father, I will not be able to look at those children without seeing my grandson. And they are probably a lot like your children and grandchildren too. I'm going to Texas for myself to see these women and children we are holding, and I encourage my colleagues to do the same.